There are moments in history when courage is not measured by how loudly a man speaks, nor by the rank stitched to his uniform, but by the silence he chooses before the storm. In the high peaks of eastern Afghanistan, far above the routes known to maps and far beyond the reach of ordinary men, such a moment once lived. It is a story few have heard and fewer still believe. Yet for those who were there, it became a lesson carved into the stone and snow of the Hindu Kush. Never underestimate the quiet man who still has one breath left to protect his brothers. The winter had come early that year, dragging with it an angry sky. Sheets of ice clung to the sheer cliffs, and winds howled like wolves across the passes. It was here that a six-man reconnaissance unit, call sign Falcon Three, had been inserted under cover of darkness. Their task was simple on paper: observe the mountain valley below, track enemy movement, and report the buildup of a Taliban weapons convoy. But war does not respect plans written in heated briefing rooms. War respects only those who survive it. The unit moved light and fast, but within hours they learned the truth. They had not been watching the valley. They were being watched in return. The enemy had buried mines along the ridgelines, closed off every exit, and waited like hunters in a frozen forest. When the ambush began, it came with sudden fury, rifles cracking from unseen angles, grenades rolling down slopes, and voices echoing across the icy stone. 2 men were wounded in the opening minutes. Ammo began to vanish quicker than the warmth in their fingers. And the harshest blow, their long-range radio antenna shattered in the fight, crushed under a tumbling boulder. They were alone, pinned, and running out of both time and blood. The team leader, Staff Sergeant Daniel Hargrove, scanned the higher peak across the ravine, a peak where they had placed a lone overwatch sniper 3 days earlier. A man who had not reported in since the storm began. A man most assumed was either dead or unconscious under the crushing cold. His name was Corporal Elias Ward. Ward was younger than most, quieter than all, the kind of soldier who rarely looked anyone in the eye yet could see farther than any man around him. He came from the backwoods of Montana, where stillness was not a skill but a way of life. He spoke little, smiled seldom, and never boasted. But there was one thing he was known for. Once he took position with a rifle, he became a shadow, with purpose. Hargrove hesitated only a moment. Then he keyed the short-range emergency channel, crackling, weak, barely functioning. "Elias, if you're alive, we need you." At first there was only static. Then, slowly, painfully slowly, a voice rose from the noise like a whisper from another world. "I can't move, but no one touches my men while I'm breathing." In that instant, hope returned to the mountain. The blizzard struck at full strength, a white curtain swallowing every shape and sound. Snow crashed sideways in violent gusts, and visibility shrank to little more than arm's length. The enemy used the storm as cover, advancing up the ravine with reckless confidence. Falcon 3 braced for the final assault, their rifles trembling from the cold, their ammunition critically low. Hargrove heard it first. A faint metallic click carried on the wind. Then the mountain answered. A single rifle cracked across the valley, sharp and clean, slicing through the storm like lightning through darkness. One insurgent collapsed mid-stride, face first into the snow. The others paused, confused. A second crack followed. Another man dropped, then a third. Within seconds, the enemy formation dissolved into chaos, scrambling for cover behind rocks and boulders. But there was no cover. Not from Elias Ward. His shots came one after another, spaced with mechanical precision, each echoing through the ravine like a hammer on an anvil. Every bullet found a mark. Every mark fell silently. From 1.2 kilometers away, through a storm that blinded the world, he was carving a path of survival with nothing but willpower and a breath that refused to quit. The insurgents regrouped, now furious, shouting for a charge. Dozens surged upward at once, firing wildly into the white void. Falcon 3 ducked and held against the stone. They waited for the inevitable break, either of ammunition or flesh. Then the radio crackled again, Ward's voice strained, fading. "Last push. Get ready to move." Across the ravine, hidden by ice and rock, the sniper braced himself. His leg was broken, his hands numb, his body half buried in snow. But his eyes stayed fixed on the scope. As the enemy breached the final ridge, Ward forced himself up onto one knee. grunting through pain, forcing frozen muscles to obey. He chambered his last round, drew a final breath, steadied the reticle on the man leading the charge, and fired. The leader fell. The charge collapsed. The path opened. Falcon 3 did not hesitate. What followed was a frantic descent through broken ice, scattered rocks, and narrow ledges that felt more like shards of the world than pathways of escape. Falcon 3 moved with desperate speed, dragging their wounded, slipping through snowdrifts that swallowed their boots, guided only by the fading rhythm of rifle fire echoing behind them. Every echo meant the sniper was still fighting, still buying time. But soon the rifle went silent. That silence was worse than any gunfire. Hargrove halted the team at a bend in the ravine. His breath steamed the air. He listened. Nothing but the howl of the storm. He knew what it meant. Ward was either unconscious or dead. "We're going back for him," Hargrove said. The medic grabbed his arm. "Dan, we can't. We won't make it up that peak. The storm will bury us before we get halfway." Another soldier shook his head. "We owe him our lives. All of us." The debate lasted seconds, but the truth settled heavier than the snow around them. Their survival depended on moving forward, not climbing back towards certain death. Hargrove clenched his jaw. Duty and loyalty waged war in his heart, but survival demanded an answer. "We get to the extraction point," he said, voice low. "And then we bring help." As they pushed down the ravine, the enemy, shaken, bloodied, leaderless, made no attempt to pursue. Fear had replaced fury. The mountain had become a ghost's domain, and none dared to follow where the riflemen had spoken with ice and iron. When Falcon 3 finally reached the emergency landing zone, they signaled a flare through the thinning storm. A helicopter thundered overhead minutes later, rotors scattering snow like the wings of some enormous steel hawk. The men piled in, breathless, exhausted, alive only because one man refused to surrender his final breath. On board, the team sat in stunned silence. Not one cheered, not one spoke. The weight of Ward's absence was heavier than the mountain they had escaped. Back at Forward Operating Base Kestrel, the commanding officer, Major Rowan Ashford, met them on the flight line. The sight of 2 wounded and 4 shaken men told him everything. "Report." Hargrove swallowed hard. "Sir, Corporal Ward held the ridge, alone. He kept them off us long enough to break contact." Ashford's eyes narrowed. "His status? We don't know. But, sir, he shouldn't be alive." The major looked toward the snow-covered mountains, now distant silhouettes under a cold moon. Then he said the only words a leader could speak when weighed against such devotion. "Then we bring him home." A rescue team launched before the hour ended. They fought their way up the frozen peak, battling wind, darkness, and terrain that seemed determined to swallow them. When they reached the overwatch position, they found Ward exactly where he had taken his last shot, half frozen, unconscious, but alive. Barely. His broken leg was splinted with a piece of his own rifle stock. His hands were raw, fingers torn from the cold, yet his body still shielded the weapon, as if refusing to let the rifle rest until his men were safe. As they lifted him onto a stretcher, one of the rescuers whispered, almost in awe, "He didn't break. Not once." Back at the medical tent, Ward drifted in and out of consciousness. When finally awake, Major Ashford stood at his bedside. The major said nothing at first. He simply looked at the young sniper, small in frame, pale in the sheets, yet greater than any man in the room. When he spoke, his voice was quiet. "Corporal, you saved 6 men today. You bought them life with everything your body had left." Ward blinked slowly. His voice was a grain of sand scraping the wind. "I promised them. No one gets through me." Ashford nodded. "And you kept your promise. Remember this lesson, Ward. Skill is a weapon. But loyalty is a force no enemy can break." Ward closed his eyes, and for the first time since the storm began, he slept without fear. Time has a way of reshaping stories, sanding down their edges until only the truth remains. In the years that followed, the events of that frozen peak became more than a mission report. They became a quiet legend among the mountain units stationed in the region. New soldiers heard it first as a rumor. The sniper who fought a battalion with one breath left. Veterans spoke of it with solemn respect. the man who broke a mountain assault alone, and commanders learned from it a lesson far older than war itself. Never judge a soldier by the noise he makes. Judge him by the silence he endures. Ward recovered slowly, his leg forever weakened but functional. Doctors said he would never return to the field. Ward ignored them. Within a year, he was back on the range, then back in the mountains, calmer than before, sharper in mind, steadier in heart. Falcon 3 never forgot what he had done. Each year, on the anniversary of their escape, they sent him a message. 4 words only. We still breathe, brother. As for the mountain where he made his stand, the locals gave it a new name. A name whispered in Dari and Pashto, a name that meant peak of the last breath. It remained on informal maps long after the war moved elsewhere. Pilots flying overhead often reported a strange silence over that stretch of stone, as if the wind itself knew the story and refused to disturb its memory. Ward never sought recognition. He never accepted medals or spoke at ceremonies. When asked by younger soldiers how he endured 3 days alone in the cold, or how he remained conscious long enough to fire that final round, he only gave the same answer, quiet and unwavering. A man doesn't hold a ridge, he holds a promise. And in the years long after he retired, long after the war slipped into archives and footnotes, young recruits still heard his final words, passed from platoon to platoon like a piece of sacred wisdom. As long as I'm breathing, no one harms my brothers. A reminder that sometimes the strongest force on the battlefield is not artillery, not armor, not even numbers. Sometimes the strongest force is a single breath that refuses to give up. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories from Histofy.